Hello and welcome. We are beginning exercise number 1 in the class Introduction to Creating Civil Cells. As you can see on the screen, we are in the file intro start.dgn file, and we will begin now with exercise number 1. In the first exercise, what we want to do is we'll look at the 4 configurations of a simple intersection, and we first of all just want to simply examine each of those configurations and how they interact and how the rules and relationships have been applied to the elements within that intersection. And we can do that by clicking on the roadway centerline element and then just by moving that element around, and you'll notice how the edge of pavement features follow the center line. In example 2, we'll do the same thing. You'll notice a difference in example 2 as the center line is extended. The edge of pavements do not follow along. They maintain an offset to the center line element, but they do not maintain the same length. And in configuration 3, once again, we'll note how the edge of pavement features are following the center line both in offset and in length. And then looking at configuration 4, it appears that the edge of pavement features have no relationship back to the center line. In doing this exercise and looking at these examples, it's just important to realize that when it comes to creating a civil cell, the rules and the relationships that are created and stored on each of the elements that will comprise the civil cell are extremely important. Creation of a civil cell really relies mostly on the creation of the proper rules and relationships in order to create the civil cell that functions effectively and efficiently in multiple design scenarios. So as we look here at exercise 1, we've evaluated the 4 configurations, and now let's go ahead and look at configuration 1 and create a civil cell. So I'll go to the civil cells menu on the task menu, and then I'm going to click the tool Create Civil Cell, and as I'm creating the civil cell, I will simply follow the prompts. So we'll key in the name for the new civil cell. That can be done on the cursor prompt or on the dialog box. So I'll key in the civil cell name, 2D intersection. Then I'll locate the reference element. The first reference element will be the roadway centerline. And the reference elements represent the elements that must be present in the design in order to place the civil cell that we're creating. So they represent the predefined elements and the elements from which the civil cell will adjust that already exist in your design. So we'll pick the centerline as the first reference file. Then we will click the existing edge of pavement as the second reference line. And now you'll note that we've selected it and notice the colors change. The colors and the highlight colors are indications of the relationship between the reference elements, which we've selected, and its dependent elements. So the reference elements, as I've selected them, they turn and highlight orange, whereas the dependent elements highlight and turn blue in this case. Okay? So by visually inspecting the selected reference elements, we can figure out that this civil cell appears to be fully ruled and constrained so that a civil cell can be created from it. So we'll follow again the prompts on the cursor. I'll reset to complete that step. I'll reset. We're not going to locate any optional references. And then finally, I'll left click to accept the creation of that civil cell. Now we can review the civil cell by going over into the civil cells dialog, and we're actually going to click the button to place the civil cell. Then we'll click the browse button on the place civil cell dialog, open up the active DGN, and now we can see our 2D intersection civil cell. And we can see the visual representation of that on the screen. Now we can go a step farther and click the OK button, and we'll just place this civil cell on one of the configurations along the bottom, configurations A through D. So I'll just zoom in to configuration A, follow the prompts. We'll locate the road center line first. And it's important to pay attention to the prompts and the naming of the reference elements. Then we'll locate the second reference element, road edge of pavement. And we'll get a preview of the civil cell that will be placed. I have the option to accept it or reset. I'm going to reset to skip this step. I don't want to view any alternatives based off the direction of the elements. So I'll right click and then left click to accept the placement of the civil cell. As I mentioned before, when it comes to creating civil cells, the rules and the relationships that are created between the elements are more important than the actual graphical representation of it. And so those rules, those relationships between the elements are carried into the civil cell and then carried into the actual design model when the civil cell is placed. Okay, so let's take a look now at configuration number 2. So let's create the civil cell for configuration number 2. And again, I can click on that element and visually inspect the relationship or the rules created for each of the edge of pavement features. We'll proceed then to create the civil cell. We'll go back into the civil cells command, open up the tool create civil cell, and again follow the prompts. We're going to name this civil cell similarly. I will just place a 2 on the end of it. Locate the reference element. Now you'll notice as you select the reference elements, the highlighted edge of pavement features. Note the difference in this configuration versus configuration number 1. Okay, the dashed lines along the element, the highlight of the dashed lines, are an indication that there are some rules and relationships applied to those elements. However, at this point, based off of our selected references, we haven't picked enough references to fully constrain or resolve those dependent elements. Okay, so when it comes down to it, the center line in this case is the reference element. It will exist in the design. All the other elements, the dependent elements, will adjust to the reference element. The center line is the reference element. The edge of pavement or the dashed highlighted lines are the dependent elements. Okay, they are the elements that will actually be placed into your design model when we place the civil cell. So we'll follow the prompts. We'll go ahead and pick the edge of pavement feature just as we did before. And again, note the highlighted elements. The dashed lines along the edge of pavement features indicate that those dependent elements are not fully ruled to the reference elements as we have them selected in order to be a full controlled civil cell. But we'll go ahead, let's go ahead and finish this step. We'll reset, and accept. So we've created that civil cell for configuration 2. Let's go review it. We'll go back over to the place civil cell command, open up the library as we did before, and then look at intersection number 2. You'll notice in the preview, in this intersection civil cell, you'll notice none of the dependent elements were carried into the civil cell. And that's an important point, and really the point of this exercise is to understand that graphically these intersection layouts look the same, but underneath or behind them, the rules and relationships between all of the elements really is the key to building or being successful at building a good civil cell. So we'll cancel that dialog, and now let's look at exercise or configuration number 3. Now in configuration number 3, we're going to create a civil cell as well. Just make a note, however, here, if I select the edge of pavement in configuration 2, you'll see that it has a rule applied to it, an offset rule that's controlling its location relative to what would be the center line reference line. And then we look at that same edge of pavement in configuration 3. Note that it has the same offset rule applied, but in addition to the offset rule, it actually has a snap rule also associated with it. Okay, So when we move this centerline edge of pavement, or this centerline control line, the edge of pavements move with it horizontally and in length as well. Okay? So configuration 3 has some additional rules and constraints associated with it. So let's create a civil cell from that. Again, we'll just keep the naming convention as we have been. I'll put a 3 on the end of it. We'll locate the reference element as we've done. Again, note as I select the reference, the highlighted dependent elements. We'll locate the edge of pavement. Now, from visually just checking this out and looking at it, we can start to be comfortable that the rules and relationships have been constructed so that this can be resolved into a civil cell. I'll finish up following the prompts and create civil cell 2D intersection civil cell 3. And once again, we will take a look at it. Open up the library, and we can see intersection 3 now in the library, and it looks correct. The red lines in the preview are the reference elements. The black lines are the dependent elements. Again, the reference elements will not, or they represent the placeholders for the elements that have to exist in your design. The black elements, or the dependent elements, are the elements that will be placed in your design and will be configured or reconfigured to adjust to match the reference elements in each and every design. Okay? And now we will continue on, and let's look at configuration number 4. And so in configuration number 4, if you recall from us looking at the center line and moving things around, if we look at exercise or configuration 4, just from visually inspecting these elements, can a civil cell be created from configuration number 4? And the answer would be no. Just from casual or preliminary observation, we can see that what would be one of our primary reference lines, the center line of the secondary road, has no relationship whatsoever with the edge of pavement. So as we would begin to create that civil cell, again, we can already know that no relationship exists as I select this reference element between that reference centerline element and any of the edge of pavement or any of the other elements in the configuration. So a civil cell could not even be created from configuration number 4.